The information provided in this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. The landscape of higher education, university admissions, and financial aid is subject to frequent change. This content does not constitute professional career, financial, or legal advice. Every university and funding body has unique criteria, and historical trends do not ensure future results. Viewers are strongly advised to conduct their own due diligence, consult with official university financial aid offices, and speak with academic advisors before making any significant financial or career commitments. If you are currently planning to pay for a PhD in the United States out of your own pocket, you are likely making a $300,000 mistake. In fact, for the vast majority of high-tier research programs, a self-funded student is often viewed by the admissions committee not as a valuable customer, but as a potential red flag. There is a hidden economy within the American ivory tower where the most successful candidates do not just get their tuition waived. They are paid a monthly living wage, provided with high-end health insurance, and given travel grants to see the world, all while pursuing their doctorate. However, the gap between those who struggle with massive student debt and those who graduate with a financial surplus is not defined by luck. It is defined by a specific, calculated sequence of academic and administrative maneuvers that most applicants do not even know exist. Today, we are pulling back the curtain on the multi-billion-dollar world of US PhD funding to show you exactly how the system operates from the inside. We are moving beyond the surface-level advice of just getting good grades and diving into the mechanics of institutional budgeting, department-level politics, and the strategic selection of programs that are mathematically more likely to offer you a full ride. By the end of this masterclass, you will understand the fundamental shift from being a student to becoming a funded researcher, and you will have the framework to navigate the most competitive application cycle in the world without spending a dime on tuition. To understand how to secure a PhD scholarship, you first have to understand what a PhD actually is in the context of the United States. In many countries, a doctorate is seen as a continuation of school, a fourth tier of education after your master's. In the US, a funded PhD is more accurately described as a high-level apprenticeship or a professional research position. When a university offers you a funding package, they are essentially hiring you. This is why the terminology matters. While we often use the word scholarship, what you are actually looking for is a funding package, which typically consists of three distinct pillars: the tuition waiver, the living stipend, and the health insurance subsidy. The tuition waiver is the most significant portion on paper, often valued between $40,000 and $70,000 per year. Historical trends in U.S. private institutions, such as those in the Ivy League or high research activity R1 universities, show that tuition rates have consistently outpaced inflation. If you were to pay this yourself over a 5 to 7 year degree, the cost could easily exceed $250,000. A fully funded offer removes this entire burden from your shoulders. The second pillar is the stipend. This is a monthly salary paid to you by the university. According to various case studies of graduate student unions across the country, these stipends generally range from $25,000 to over $50,000 per year, depending on the cost of living in the city and the department's budget. The third pillar, health insurance, is often overlooked but critical. In the U.S. healthcare system, a comprehensive plan can cost several $1,000s annually. A competitive PhD package covers 80 to 100% of this premium. When you add these three pillars together, a PhD offer in the U.S. is effectively a job offer with a total compensation package exceeding $100,000 a year. However, these packages are not handed out based on a simple merit-based lottery. They are distributed based on the university's return on investment. When a department admits a student with a full scholarship, they are betting that this student will produce research, publish papers, and eventually increase the prestige of the institution, which in turn attracts more federal and private grant money. This is the first major realization you must have. You are not asking for a favor. You are presenting a business case for why you are a low-risk, high-reward investment for their research group. There are three primary avenues through which this funding is funneled to students, and your strategy must account for all three. The first is university-wide fellowships. These are the most prestigious and are often awarded to the top 1 or 2% of applicants across the entire institution. These are usually non-service fellowships, meaning you are paid to do nothing but your own research. Historical data suggests that these are often used as recruitment tools to lure high-potential candidates away from competing universities. The second and most common is the graduate assistantship. This is divided into teaching assistantships, or TAs, and research assistantships, or RAs. As a TA, The university pays your tuition and stipend in exchange for you leading discussion sections, grading papers, or teaching undergraduate courses. As an RA, you are paid directly from a specific professor's research grant to work in their lab or on their specific project. The third avenue consists of external fellowships, such as those from the National Science Foundation, the Fulbright program, or private foundations like the Ford Foundation. Securing one of these makes you a free agent. You essentially bring your own money to the table, making you the most attractive candidate a department could ever hope for. The potential outcomes for your application depend heavily on how early you begin this process. We are not talking about weeks or months. The most successful applicants often begin their preparation 18 to 24 months before they intend to set foot on a U.S. campus. This timeline is necessary because U.S. PhD admissions are a synchronized dance. Most applications are due between December and January for a start date in the following August. If you miss that window, you have to wait an entire year. But the work starts long before December. You have to identify which professors have active grants. You have to understand the difference between a department that is growing and a department that is facing budget cuts. For example, in historical trends observed during economic downturns, state-funded universities might see a tightening of their fellowship budgets, while private universities with large endowments may remain stable. Knowing where the money is flowing is just as important as having a high GPA. Consider the case study of two hypothetical applicants, student A and student B. Student A has a perfect 4.0 GPA and applies to the top 5 most famous universities in the world, places like Harvard, Stanford, and MIT, without contacting any faculty beforehand. They rely solely on their grades. Student B has a slightly lower GPA, but spends 6 months researching specific labs that recently received 5-year federal grants. Student B reaches out to potential advisors, discusses their shared research interests, and aligns their personal statement with the specific goals of those funded projects. Historical trends in admissions suggest that student B is significantly more likely to receive a fully funded offer because they have demonstrated a direct fit with the funded research agenda. Student A, despite their perfect grades, is a wild card. In a system where funding is finite, universities prefer the sure bet. This masterclass is designed to turn you into that sure bet. Over the next several sections of this series, we will break down the granular details of the application. We will analyze how to decode a professor's lab website to see if they actually have money to hire new RAs. We will discuss the strategic importance of the statement of purpose, which is not an essay about your life story, but a technical proposal of your future value. We will look at the shifting role of standardized testing like the GRE, and how its declining importance in some fields is actually making other parts of your application, like your research experience, exponentially more critical. The U.S. PhD market is one of the most competitive environments on Earth, but it is also one of the most rewarding for those who understand the rules of the game. You are about to learn how to navigate the complexities of international transcript evaluation, the nuances of recommendation letters that actually carry weight, and the art of the interview. This is not about shortcuts. It is about a deep fundamental understanding of how American academia works. If you follow this step-by-step framework, you will be moving from a position of uncertainty to a position of strategic advantage. We are starting with the foundation, identifying your value and understanding the financial landscape. From there, we will build your application piece by piece until you have a portfolio that doesn't just ask for admission, but commands a full funding package. This is the beginning of your journey toward a debt-free doctorate in the United States. Imagine if you are Alex, a talented researcher in 2026 looking at a screen filled with hundreds of university logos, each one representing a potential path but also a potential financial trap. Alex knows that the traditional approach of just picking the most famous names is a strategy rooted in the past. To succeed in the current academic climate, you must first master the art of institutional scouting. This is not about finding a school. It is about finding a microeconomy that is currently expanding. In the United States, the Carnegie Classification of Institutions of Higher Education is your first and most vital tool. You are looking specifically for our 1 institutions, which are classified as having very high research activity. As of 2026, there are approximately 150 to 160 of these institutions. These are the hubs where federal agencies like the National Science Foundation and the National Institutes of Health funnel billions of dollars. If a school is not an R1 or at least a high-activity R2, the likelihood of them having the internal capital to offer you a full tuition waiver plus a $35,000 stipend is statistically lower. Step 1 in this deep dive is the grant audit. Before you even look at an application form, you need to look at the money. Historical trends show that departments with recent, large-scale federal arrivals are the ones most desperate to hire new PhD students. You can use public databases like Report from the NIH or the NSF Award Search to see exactly which universities received funding in the last 12 to 18 months. If you see that the University of Michigan just landed a $20 million grant for sustainable energy research, and that is your field, that department is no longer just a school on a list, it is a primary target. They have a legal and professional obligation to spend that money on research, and research requires doctoral students. Case studies of successful applicants in 2025 and 2026 reveal that those who mention specific, recently funded departmental initiatives in their first point of contact had a significantly higher response rate from faculty. Next, we must dismantle the myth of the prestige trap. Many applicants waste their entire application budget applying only to the Ivy League. While these schools have massive endowments, they also have the highest rejection rates and the most internal competition for fellowships. Consider an alternative scenario where Alex looks at a high-performing R1 land-grant university in the Midwest or the South. These institutions often have lower costs of living, meaning a $30,000 stipend goes twice as far as it would in Boston or New York City. Furthermore, these universities often have specific mandates to grow their research output, leading to more aggressive funding packages for international and domestic talent alike. You are looking for the sweet spot where high institutional wealth meets a high demand for new researchers. Now, let us look at the internal structure of the funding offer. When you receive an offer letter, you are looking for 5 specific lines of text. First is the duration of the support. A standard PhD takes 5 to 7 years. If a university only offers a 1-year scholarship with a promise to renew based on performance, you are in a high-risk position. Historical trends in academic financing suggest that you should aim for a multi-year guarantee, typically 4 or 5 years, written into the initial offer. Second is the nature of the work. Is it a fellowship, a teaching assistantship, or a research assistantship? A fellowship is the gold standard because it allows you to focus 100% of your time on your dissertation. A teaching assistantship is a job that requires 20 hours of work per week, which can slow down your research progress. A research assistantship is often the best balance, as you are paid to do the very research that will eventually become your thesis. Step 2 involves the faculty match analysis. In the US system, the department might admit you, but a specific professor often funds you. Imagine Alex finds a professor whose work aligns perfectly with their interests. Alex must then perform a publication audit. Look at the professor's recent papers from 2024 and 2025. Who are the co-authors? If the co-authors are all current PhD students, it is a sign of a healthy, productive, and funded lab. If the professor has not published with a student in 3 years, it is a red flag. It may indicate a lack of funding or a department in transition. You are looking for a mentor who is an active player in the current academic economy. Let us discuss the hidden costs that a scholarship must cover to be truly debt-free. In 2026, many U.S. universities have introduced mandatory student fees that can range from $500 to $2,000 per semester. These are often not covered by a standard tuition waiver. You must investigate whether the department or the graduate school provides a fee waiver program. Additionally, look at the health insurance premium. In 2026, the cost of healthcare continues to be a major factor in a student's quality of life. A scholarship that covers 100% of the premium is worth roughly $4,000 to $5,000 more than one that only covers 50%. These details are the difference between living comfortably and struggling to buy groceries. Case studies in the social sciences and humanities show a different funding landscape than STEM. In these fields, funding is more often tied to the department's teaching needs rather than external research grants. If you are applying for a PhD in history or English, your strategy shifts toward proving your pedagogical value. Can you teach undergraduate composition? Do you have experience in digital humanities that can help the department modernize? Historical trends indicate that humanities departments are increasingly looking for versatile scholars who can contribute to multiple facets of the university's mission. For Alex, this means highlighting not just research potential, but also teaching philosophy and administrative capability. We also need to address the timeline of the funding cycle. The fiscal year for many U.S. universities begins in July. However, their budget planning happens in the preceding winter. This is why the December application deadline is so rigid. If you apply late, the money is already allocated. By the time March rolls around, committees have already sent out their first round of offers. If you are on a wait list, you are essentially waiting for someone else to turn down their money so it can be passed to you. This is why your initial outreach in September and October is so critical. You are building a relationship with the gatekeepers before the gates even open. Imagine the leverage you have when you understand these mechanics. You aren't just an applicant hoping for a chance. You are a savvy professional who understands institutional budgets, grant cycles, and the labor needs of a research university. You are identifying the schools that have the most to gain from your presence. You are looking at the data, analyzing the trends of 2026, and positioning yourself as a solution to their departmental needs. But once you have identified these high-potential institutions, how do you actually make them notice you? How do you ensure your academic profile stands out in a pile of 500 other applicants who also have high scores? The answer lies in the technical construction of your research portfolio and the specific language you use to communicate with faculty. Most people send a generic email that gets deleted in seconds. There is a specific template, a specific set of keywords, and a specific timing that can increase your response rate by over 300%. If you fail to master this initial contact, the most generous scholarships in the world will remain out of your reach, regardless of your GPA. In the next part, we will break down the exact anatomy of the introductory email and the research pitch that compels professors to fight for your funding. We will move from the institutional level down to the individual level, showing you how to turn a cold contact into a funded invitation. The art of the cold contact is often the single most misunderstood phase of the PhD application process. Many applicants believe they are bothering a professor, or that their email will simply be ignored. While it is true that a high-ranking faculty member at a major or one university might receive over 100 emails a day, the reality is that these professors are constantly scouting for talent. In the academic economy of 2026, a professor without productive PhD students is a professor who cannot fulfill their grant obligations. To bridge this gap, you must stop sending generic inquiries and start sending surgical strikes. Imagine if Jordan, an aspiring doctoral candidate, spends weeks drafting a 3-page life story and sends it to 50 different faculty members. The historical trend for this approach is a near 0% response rate. Contrast this with the case study of an applicant who sends 5 highly tailored, data-driven emails and receives 3 invitations for a Zoom interview within 48 hours. The difference lies in the architecture of the initial pitch. Step 1 is the subject line. This is your first hurdle. In 2026, academic spam filters are more aggressive than ever. A subject line like prospective PhD student or inquiry about scholarship is likely to be ignored or filtered out. Instead, your subject line must be a specific value proposition. For example, PhD inquiry, expertise in neural network optimization for climate modeling. This subject line does 3 things immediately. It identifies the purpose of the email, it states your specific niche, and it aligns your expertise with a high-priority research area. It tells the professor exactly which bucket you belong in before they even open the message. The body of the email must follow a strict 3-paragraph structure, designed for maximum retention and minimum friction. The first paragraph is the hook and alignment. You must immediately demonstrate that you have done your homework. Mention a specific paper the professor published in 2024 or 2025. Do not just say you liked it. Explain how it influenced your current research direction. For instance, Jordan might write that the professor's recent work on carbon sequestration modeling provided the framework for their own master's thesis on soil salinity. This establishes immediate credibility. You are no longer a stranger. You are a peer who is already engaged in their specific intellectual conversation. The second paragraph is the proof of concept. This is where you summarize your technical qualifications without the fluff. Use hard data and specific outcomes. Instead of saying you are good at lab work, state that you managed a $30,000 equipment budget and reduced sample processing time by 15% using a specific Python-based automation script. In the US market, professors are looking for self-starters who can hit the ground running. If you are a social science student, highlight your experience with specific datasets or your fluency in a rare language necessary for field research. You are proving that you are a low-maintenance, high-output researcher who will add immediate value to their lab or department. The third paragraph is the call to action. This must be low friction and specific. Do not ask if they have a scholarship available. That is a question for a later stage and can often lead to a hard no if the budget is currently being audited. Instead, ask for a 15-minute conversation to discuss their current research priorities and how your background might align with their upcoming projects. This is a much easier yes. By framing it as a professional networking call rather than a request for money, you open a door that allows you to demonstrate your personality and communication skills. Let us look at a case study of a 2026 applicant in the field of public health. This individual targeted a department at Johns Hopkins and noticed that a specific professor had recently been quoted in a news article regarding a new federal initiative on urban health equity. The applicant tailored their email to reference both the professor's 2025 peer-reviewed publication and that recent news quote. The professor replied within 4 hours, not because the applicant had the highest GRE scores, but because the applicant demonstrated that they were already operating within the professor's immediate professional orbit. This led to an informal interview where the professor disclosed that they were currently drafting a grant proposal that included funding for 2 new doctoral students. By the time the formal application was submitted in December, the professor was already advocating for this applicant with the admissions committee. The timing of this contact is just as critical as the content. Historical trends suggest that the optimal window for these initial reaches is between late August and mid-October. This is the period when professors are returning from summer research, their teaching schedules are stabilizing, and they are beginning to think about their staffing needs for the following academic year. If you wait until November, you are competing with the thousands of other applicants who are scrambling at the last minute. If you contact them in July, they are likely out of the office or focused on finishing their own grant cycles. However, a successful email is only the first part of the pitch. You must be prepared for the informal interview, which in 2026 is almost always conducted via video call. This is not a casual chat. It is a technical screening. You must be able to discuss your past research with a level of depth that proves you did the work yourself. Imagine if Jordan is asked about a specific methodology used in their master's thesis and cannot explain the nuances of the statistical controls. That is an immediate red flag. You should have a 1-page research summary or a digital portfolio ready to share on screen. This shows professional preparedness and a level of technical literacy that is highly valued in U.S. doctoral programs. Furthermore, you must be prepared to handle the conversation about funding with tact. If a professor says they would love to have you but don't have current grant money for an RA position, your response should not be to walk away. Instead, pivot. Ask about the department's teaching assistantship allocations, or if they would be willing to support your application for an external fellowship. Many students secure their own funding through programs like the Fulbright or the DAAD, but they need a host professor in the U.S. to sign off on their research plan. By securing the professor's intellectual endorsement first, you make the financial part of the equation much easier to solve. Beyond the individual professor, you must also understand the role of the graduate coordinator. This is an administrative staff member who knows the ins and outs of the department's budget. While the professor is the intellectual gatekeeper, the graduate coordinator is the procedural gatekeeper. Establishing a polite, professional relationship with this person can yield vital information, such as the exact number of funded slots available this year versus historical trends from the previous 3 years. They can also provide clarity on whether the stipend is adjusted annually for inflation, a critical detail in 2020 SIXS economic environment. By mastering this layer of professional networking, you are effectively bypassing the cold, impersonal algorithm of the online application portal. You are transforming your name from a string of characters on a spreadsheet into a living, breathing colleague that the faculty are excited to work with. You are creating a scenario where the admissions committee isn't asking if you meet the requirements, but rather how they can make the budget work to ensure you choose their university over a competitor. This level of proactive engagement is what separates the funded scholars from the applicants who are still waiting for a response that may never come. But even with a professor on your side, your formal application documents must still pass through the departmental committee. The most dangerous part of this process is the statement of purpose. Most students treat this as a personal memoir, a mistake that can lead to an immediate rejection, even with faculty support. There is a specific high-level rhetorical structure that the most successful U.S. PhD applications use to prove their academic maturity. If you write this statement like a college essay, you have already lost. In the next part, we are going to dissect the statement of purpose word by word to show you how to write a document that reads like a professional research proposal and makes your funding a mathematical necessity for the department. The statement of purpose is where most applications go to die. In the academic market of 2026, the admissions committee is not looking for a heartfelt story about how you fell in love with science as a child or a poetic description of your passion for literature. They are looking for a technical blueprint of your future research and a professional justification for why they should invest hundreds of thousands of dollars in your training. To the committee, you are an asset in development. If your statement of purpose reads like a memoir, you are signaling that you do not yet understand the professional nature of a PhD. To succeed, you must adopt the mindset of a grant writer. Imagine if Taylor, an applicant with a strong background in urban planning, writes a statement focusing on their personal journey and childhood in a developing city. While moving, this approach often fails to address the specific needs of an R1 research department. Now, contrast this with a case study of an applicant who identifies a specific gap in current transit-oriented development literature and proposes a methodology involving machine learning and longitudinal data sets to address it. This second applicant is speaking the language of the committee. The first 500 words of your statement must establish your research identity with surgical precision. This is what we call the research niche anchor. You must state within the first 2 sentences exactly what field you are in and what specific problem you intend to solve. For example, Taylor should start by stating that their research focuses on the intersection of algorithmic bias in public transit routing and socioeconomic mobility in mid-sized American cities. This immediately categorizes the application. It tells the committee which faculty members should read it and which funding pots it might qualify for. Historical trends in 2026 show that statements that use specific, high-level terminology early on have a much higher rate of being passed on to the full committee review stage. After establishing the niche, you move into the evidence of preparation. This is not a list of your achievements, you already have a CV for that. Instead, this is a narrative analysis of your previous research. You must explain not just what you did, but what you learned and how it prepared you for doctoral-level work. If you worked in a lab, do not just say you ran samples. Explain that you utilized high-performance liquid chromatography to analyze chemical precursors and developed a new calibration protocol that increased data reliability by 12%. If you are in the humanities, do not just say you read a lot of books. Explain how your archival research in a specific 18th century collection led you to challenge a prevailing theory regarding colonial trade routes. You are providing the committee with the data they need to justify your funding. You are showing them that you have already survived the rigors of independent research and that you are ready for the next level of complexity. Now, let us discuss the crucial section on fit in faculty. This is where you prove that this specific university is the only place where your research can thrive. In 2026, many departments are looking for interdisciplinary synergy. Imagine if Taylor mentions that Professor X's work on spatial informatics and Professor Y's work on social justice in urban design provide the perfect dual mentorship structure for their project. You must be specific. Reference their recent 2024 and 2025 publications, and explain how your proposed work builds upon or diverges from their findings. This shows that you are not just applying to a brand name, you are applying to a specific intellectual community. A common mistake is to name-drop the most famous professor in the department who may not even be taking new students. A more strategic move is to identify a mid-career associate professor who just received a major grant. These faculty members are often the most motivated to advocate for a new student to join their team. The middle section of your statement should be the proposed research directions. You are not expected to have your entire dissertation planned out, but you must show that you can formulate a viable research question. This is where you demonstrate your familiarity with the current state of the field. What are the unanswered questions? What are the methodological limitations of previous studies? By outlining 2 or 3 potential avenues for your doctoral research, you show the committee that you have the intellectual maturity to drive a project forward. Case studies of successful social science applicants in 2026 show that those who incorporate a discussion of data ethics and algorithmic transparency into their proposals are receiving more favorable reviews, as these are high-priority areas for federal funding agencies. One of the most powerful tools in your statement of purpose is the discussion of potential outcomes. You should conclude your research proposal by explaining the broader impact of your work. Will it influence public policy? Will it lead to a technological breakthrough? In the U.S. system, this is often referred to as the broader impacts, a term used extensively by the National Science Foundation. By framing your research in terms of its social, economic, or scientific value, you align yourself with the university's mission to produce research that matters. This makes you a more compelling candidate for university-wide fellowships, which often prioritize applicants who can demonstrate the impact of their work beyond the walls of the ivory tower. Let us look at a specific example of how to handle a potential weakness in your application. such as a lower-than-average GPA in your early years of college. Instead of making excuses, use the statement of purpose to demonstrate a growth trajectory. Imagine Taylor had a rough freshman year, but then excelled in their junior and senior year research projects. Taylor should spend no more than 2 sentences explaining the context of the early grades, and then immediately pivot back to their research accomplishments. You are showing the committee that you are a resilient professional who has moved past those early obstacles. In the 2026 admissions environment, committees are increasingly valuing upward trends in research excellence over a static, perfect GPA. The tone of your statement must be authoritative yet humble. You are a junior colleague, not a student. This means avoiding phrases like "I hope to learn" or "I want to study." Instead, use phrases like "I intend to investigate," "I will utilize," and "my research aims to contribute." This shift in language is subtle but profound. It signals to the committee that you are already thinking like a PhD. Historical trends in admissions letters suggest that applicants who use proactive, investigative language are perceived as more capable of handling the independence required for doctoral-level research. Another vital element for 2026 is the inclusion of your technical stack. Whether you are in STEM, the social sciences, or even the digital humanities, mentioning the specific software, programming languages, or archival techniques you are proficient in adds a layer of concrete reality to your statement. If you are an expert in R, Python GIS, or specific qualitative coding software like NVivo, state it. If you have experience with specialized lab equipment or unique field research protocols, include it. These are the tools of your trade, and showing that you already know how to use them reduces the perceived training burden on the department. Finally, we must address the length and formatting. A standard U.S. statement of purpose is between 800 and 1,200 words, or about 2 pages single-spaced. Every word must earn its place. Eliminate all fluff. Remove all platitudes about your love for learning. Replace them with specific details about your research. If you find yourself with extra space, add more depth to your proposed research methodology or more detail about why a specific lab's recent work is relevant to your goals. The goal is a dense, high-information document that leaves the reader with no doubt that you are a prepared, motivated, and highly capable researcher. By the time the committee reaches the end of your statement, they should be able to visualize exactly what you will be doing in their department for the next 5 years. They should see how you will fit into their existing labs, how you will interact with their faculty, and how your research will enhance the department's reputation. You have moved from being an anonymous applicant to being a strategic necessity. But the statement of purpose is only one part of the package. Even a perfect statement can be undermined by weak or generic letters of recommendation. In 2026, a standard letter that simply says you are a good student is the kiss of death. In the next part, we are going to look at the secret protocol for securing recommendation letters that actually move the needle, letters that serve as an expert witness testimony for your funding. We will show you exactly how to manage your professors, so they write the glowing, high-impact endorsements you need to win the most competitive scholarships in the country. In the competitive landscape of 2026, a letter of recommendation is not a courtesy. It is a legal and professional validation of your potential to handle millions of dollars in research funding. When an admissions committee at a top tier R1 university opens your file, they are looking for specific, high-stakes testimony. They have already seen your grades and read your statement of purpose, but they want to hear from an established authority that you are a safe bet. Most students treat this part of the application as a passive event, simply asking a professor for a letter and hoping for the best. This is a strategic error that often results in what we call the faint praise rejection. A letter that says you were a pleasure to have in class and received an A is essentially a polite way of telling the committee you are average. To secure a full funding package, you must move beyond the polite and into the transformative. You must manage your recommenders with the same precision you use for your research. Imagine if Morgan, a high-achieving student in 2026, asks 3 professors for letters 2 weeks before the deadline. One professor is a busy department chair, one is an adjunct who barely remembers Morgan, and one is a mentor who is currently on sabbatical. The potential outcomes here are devastating. Morgan receives 3 generic letters that all say the same thing. To the committee, this lack of depth suggests that Morgan has not made a significant impact on their academic community. Now, consider a different case study. An applicant named Casey who begins the recommendation protocol 6 months in advance. Casey identifies 3 specific roles for their recommenders: the technical expert, the research supervisor, and the character witness. Casey doesn't just ask for a letter. Casey provides a comprehensive recommendation packet that does 80% of the work for the professor. The first step in this masterclass protocol is the selection phase. In 2026, the hierarchy of letters has shifted. A letter from a world-renowned researcher who doesn't know you well is often less valuable than a letter from a mid-level professor who can describe your specific contributions to a high-impact project. You need people who can speak to your resilience, your technical proficiency, and your ability to work in a team. If you are applying for a PhD in a STEM field, at least 2 of your letters must come from people who have seen you handle a lab environment. If you are in the humanities or social sciences, they must speak to your archival skills or your ability to synthesize complex theoretical frameworks. Once you have identified your trio, you must execute the narrative alignment meeting. Do not send an email asking for a letter. Ask for a brief meeting to discuss your doctoral goals. During this meeting, you tell the professor exactly what you need them to highlight. For example, Casey might say to Professor Williams, "I am applying to the University of California system because of their focus on sustainable logistics. Since I worked on your 2025 grant project involving supply chain optimization, would you be comfortable highlighting my role in the data cleaning and the specific Python scripts I wrote for the final report?" By doing this, you are ensuring that the letter contains concrete evidence rather than vague adjectives. You are giving the professor a specific story to tell, which makes their letter stand out in a pile of thousands. The second step is the recommendation packet. This is the secret weapon of the most successful 2026 applicants. 1 week after your meeting, you send an organized digital folder to each recommender. This folder should include your current CV, your finalized statement of purpose, a list of the schools you are applying to with their respective deadlines, and most importantly, a bulleted list of your accomplishments in that specific professor's class or lab. Historical trends show that even the most well-meaning professors forget the details of a student's work from 2 years ago. By providing these talking points, you are essentially ghostwriting the most important parts of the letter. You are making it easy for them to be your champion. Let us look at a case study involving a 2026 applicant for a PhD in clinical psychology. This field is notoriously competitive, often with an acceptance rate lower than 1% for funded slots. The applicant, Jamie, needed letters that proved they could handle the emotional and technical rigors of clinical research. Jamie's recommendation packet included a summary of their 2025 internship hours, the specific diagnostic tools they were trained on, and a reminder of a specific incident where Jamie handled a difficult data discrepancy with poise. One of the recommenders used these exact details to argue that Jamie was more prepared for a PhD than most graduating master's students. This specific, evidence-based testimony is what triggers the committee to move an application from the maybe pile to the fully funded pile. We also need to discuss the waiver of access. In the United States, you have a legal right to see your recommendation letters unless you waive that right on the application form. In 2026, the historical trend remains clear. You must waive your right to see the letters. If you do not, the admissions committee will assume the professor was not being entirely honest because they knew you would read it. A confidential letter carries 10 times the weight of an open one. It signals that there is a level of trust and professional integrity between you and your recommender. If you are worried about what a professor might say, that is a sign that you should not be asking them for a letter in the first place. Timing and follow-up are the final pieces of the recommendation puzzle. In the 2026 academic calendar, professors are overwhelmed by mid-November. If you wait until then, your letter will be rushed. The goal is to have your recommenders agree by late September and have all materials in their hands by October 15th for a December 1st deadline. This gives them 6 weeks to write during their quieter windows. You should send a polite check-in email 2 weeks before the deadline and a final thank you note once the letters are submitted. This isn't just about being polite, it's about professional networking. These people will be your colleagues in a few years. Another critical element for 2026 is the diversity and inclusion context. Many U.S. scholarships now have specific components looking for applicants who can contribute to the diversity of the academic community. If this applies to you, you can ask one of your recommenders to specifically speak to your leadership in this area or your ability to mentor underrepresented students. This adds a layer of social value to your technical expertise, making you a more attractive candidate for university-wide fellowships that aim to build a more inclusive campus environment. Imagine the confidence you will have knowing that while other applicants are hoping their professors remember them, you have provided your recommenders with a roadmap to your success. You have ensured that your letters are not just positive, but are strategically aligned with the requirements of the scholarships you are seeking. You are no longer a student asking for a favor. You are a professional managing a high-stakes team. Every letter in your file will serve as a building block, constructing a narrative of an applicant who is prepared, productive, and indispensable. But even with the best letters and a perfect statement, there is a technical hurdle that stops thousands of international and domestic students every year: the standardized testing and transcript evaluation trap. In 2026, the GRE is not what it used to be, but the ways universities use your scores and your GPA have become more complex and algorithmic. If you misinterpret a university's policy on score reporting or fail to provide a proper transcript evaluation, your application could be automatically discarded by a computer before a human ever sees it. In the next part, we are going to dive into the data-driven world of GRE strategies and GPA optimization. We will show you how to navigate the 2026 testing landscape, including which schools have gone GRE optional and why that might actually be a trap for certain applicants. We will break down exactly how to present your academic record so that the numbers work for you, not against you. The numbers game in 2026 is no longer about being perfect. It is about being contextually superior. As you approach the technical phase of your application, you will encounter the most debated topic in modern graduate admissions: the standardized testing paradox. Over the last few years, a significant number of U.S. institutions have moved toward GRE optional or GRE blind policies. However, for a student seeking a full funding package, treating optional as a reason to skip the test can be a strategic disaster. Imagine if Skylar, a brilliant engineering student in 2026, applies to 10 or 1 universities with a solid 3.4 GPA. Skylar notices that 7 of these schools are GRE optional and decides to save the $200 and skip the exam. What Skylar doesn't realize is that they are now being compared solely on their GPA against applicants from universities with notorious grade inflation where a 3.9 is the average. Without a standardized metric to anchor their technical proficiency, Skylar's 3.4 looks risky to a committee looking to distribute a limited number of research assistantships. Historical trends in 2026 admissions suggest that for international students or students from lesser-known domestic colleges, a high GRE score acts as a vital de-risking mechanism. It provides a universal benchmark that translates across borders and grading systems. If you are in a STEM field, your quantitative score is your primary currency. For top-tier funding, the unofficial floor is often a 165 or higher. In 2026, committees are using these scores not just for admission, but as a filter for university-wide fellowships. These fellowships are often managed by the graduate school, not your specific department. While your department might not care about your GRE, the Central University Committee, which compares a poet to a physicist, often relies on these standardized numbers to distribute the largest pots of money. Let us look at a case study of a social science applicant named Avery. Avery applied to a highly competitive political science PhD program at a top-tier university in the South. The program was GRE optional. Avery scored a 162 in verbal and a 5.0 in analytical writing. By submitting these scores, Avery provided the committee with concrete evidence of their ability to handle the heavy reading and writing load of a doctoral program. This score, combined with a strong statement of purpose, allowed Avery to secure a multi-year presidential fellowship that covered not only tuition and stipend, but also provided a $10,000 relocation grant. Had Avery skipped the test, they would have relied entirely on their undergraduate transcripts, which were from a university the committee was less familiar with. Now, we must navigate the complexities of GPA optimization. In 2026, admissions committees are moving away from looking at just the cumulative number. They are performing what is known as a trend analysis. If you had a difficult first year but your grades in your major-specific courses during your junior and senior years were exceptional, you must highlight this. Imagine if Skylar's cumulative GPA is a 3.3, but their major GPA, the grades in only their engineering and math courses, is a 3.8. In the 2026 application portals, there is often a specific section to list your major GPA. You must use this to your advantage. Historical data shows that research committees care far more about your performance in advanced quantum mechanics than they do about an introductory elective you took in your first semester. Furthermore, for international applicants, the transcript evaluation is the invisible hurdle. In 2026, many U.S. universities require a third-party evaluation from agencies like World Education Services or Educational Credential Evaluators. You cannot simply send a scanned copy of your original degree and expect the committee to do the math. You need a course-by-course evaluation that converts your local grades into the US 4.0 scale. Case studies show that students who use the WSICAP service, which stores and sends verified transcripts directly to universities, have fewer administrative delays. This is critical because if your transcript evaluation arrives 2 days after the deadline, your application for funding is often automatically disqualified, regardless of how talented you are. Another vital component of the 2026 testing landscape is English proficiency. For many years, the TOEFL and IELTS were the only options. However, in 2026, the Duolingo English test has gained massive traction due to its lower cost and accessibility. But here is the catch that many applicants miss. While the Duolingo test might be accepted for admission, it may not be sufficient for a teaching assistantship. Many U.S. states have specific laws requiring a certain score on the speaking section of the TOEFL to be eligible for a TA position. If your goal is a full ride that includes a TA stipend, you must check the specific state and university requirements for instructional funding. Scoring a 28 or 29 on the TOEFL speaking section is often the golden ticket that allows a department to hire you immediately as a teacher, which secures your funding from day one. Consider the scenario where you are competing for the last funded spot in a biology department. There are 2 candidates with identical research interests and strong letters. Candidate A has a high TOEFL score but no GRE. Candidate B has a high TOEFL score and a 167 GRE quant score. In a 2026 budget meeting, the committee is mathematically more likely to choose candidate B. Why? Because candidate B's scores make them eligible for external university fellowships, which means the department might be able to get candidate B's first year of funding paid for by the university's central office, saving the department's own budget for other needs. By taking the test and performing well, you are literally making yourself cheaper and more attractive for the department to hire. As we move deeper into the technicalities, you must also consider the timing of these tests. In 2026, test centers can fill up months in advance, especially during the peak season of September to November. You should aim to have all your standardized testing completed by the end of August. This allows you to see your scores and adjust your university list accordingly. If your scores are lower than the historical averages for your dream school, you have time to either retake the test or pivot your strategy to schools where your research profile carries more weight than your testing numbers. The integration of these numbers into your overall narrative is where the magic happens. You should never mention your GRE or GPA in your statement of purpose, unless you are briefly explaining a specific discrepancy. Let the numbers sit in their own section of the application. Your statement of purpose is for your ideas. Your CV and test reports are for your data. When a committee sees a high-level research proposal backed by solid standardized scores, they see a candidate who has both the creativity to innovate and the discipline to master standardized technical requirements. By mastering the 2026 testing and transcript landscape, you are clearing the path of any administrative red flags. You are ensuring that when the faculty committee sits down to discuss who gets the $100,000 funding package, your name is not dismissed because of a missing evaluation or a misinterpreted GPA. You are presenting a clean, professional, and technically verified academic record. But even with perfect numbers and a brilliant statement, your CV is the document they will refer to most often during their deliberations. It is the executive summary of your entire professional life. If your CV is formatted like a standard job resume, you are doing it wrong. A curriculum vitae for a PhD scholarship is a very different beast, and in 2026, there are specific structural requirements that can mean the difference between being viewed as a student or a scientist. In the next part, we will dismantle the traditional resume and build a high-impact academic CV from the ground up, showing you the exact sections, formatting, and keyword strategies that catch the eye of a research director in less than 10 seconds. An academic curriculum vitae is not a resume. In the professional world of 2026, a resume is a concise summary designed to get you an interview for a corporate job, usually limited to 1 or 2 pages. An academic CV, however, is a comprehensive record of your scholarly life. For a PhD admissions committee looking to award a high-value funding package, your CV is the evidence locker. It is where they go to verify the claims you made in your statement of purpose. If you use a standard corporate template with sections like objective or soft skills, you are signaling that you are not yet integrated into the academic culture. To win a full scholarship, your CV must look like it belongs to a researcher, not a job seeker. Imagine Riley, an applicant in 2026 with a brilliant master's thesis and 2 years of lab experience. Riley uses a colorful one-page resume template found on a popular design site. Despite Riley's actual achievements, the committee schemes it and sees a lack of professional academic maturity. Now, consider a case study where Riley uses a clean LaTeX-formatted CV that prioritizes research experience and publications. The committee immediately recognizes the structure and can find the data points they need to justify a 5-year funding commitment. The architecture of your 2026 academic CV must follow a specific hierarchy. At the top, immediately following your contact information, is your education section. In the U.S. system, this must include your degree, institution, graduation date, and crucially, your GPA if it is a point of strength. Underneath each degree, you should list your thesis title and the name of your advisor. This is a subtle but powerful networking tool. If a professor on the committee knows your advisor or recognizes the lab where you trained, your credibility increases instantly. Historical trends in admissions show that institutional lineage matters. Even if your university isn't globally famous, naming your advisor provides a point of reference for the committee to verify your training. Immediately following education is the most important section for a funded PhD applicant: research experience. This is where you move from being a student to being a producer of knowledge. In 2026, you cannot simply list your title and the dates. You must provide a bulleted breakdown of your technical and intellectual contributions. For example, Riley shouldn't just write research assistant at State University. Instead, Riley should write, investigated the impact of microplastics on local riparian ecosystems using mass spectrometry, developed a novel sampling protocol that reduced contamination rates by 18%, presented weekly data updates to a team of 12 researchers, use active power-driven verbs, designed, implemented, analyzed, published, collaborated. This section should take up the bulk of your first page because this is exactly what the university is paying you for. They are not paying you to take classes, they are paying you to conduct research. Next is the publications and presentations section. In 2026, the academic economy is built on the currency of citations. Even if you do not have a lead author paper in a major journal, you must list every contribution. This includes co-authored papers, undergraduate journals, and even works currently under review. If a paper is under review, list the journal name and mark it as under review. This shows the committee that you have completed the research cycle, from hypothesis to manuscript, which is a high-level skill that many applicants lack. Presentations are equally vital. Did you present a poster at a local conference? Did you give a talk at a departmental symposium? List them. Use the standard citation format for your field, whether it is APA, MLA, or Chicago. This demonstrates that you are already familiar with the professional standards of your discipline. Then comes the awards and honors section. This is where you list every scholarship, Dean's List mention, and travel grant you have ever received. In the world of PhD funding, money follows money. If a committee sees that you have already won a small competitive grant or a local scholarship, they view you as a lower-risk investment. It proves that other organizations have already vetted you and found you worthy of financial support. Even a small $200 travel award should be on this list. It speaks to your ability to secure external funding, which is a key performance indicator for successful PhD students in 2026. We must also discuss the technical skills section. For a 2026 applicant, this is not about saying you know Microsoft Word. This is about your research toolkit. List your programming languages like Python, R, or Julia. List your laboratory techniques like CRISPR, NMR spectroscopy, or qualitative coding. If you are in the social sciences, list your proficiency in Stata, SPSS, or GIS. If you have been trained in specific ethical protocols or safety certifications, include them here. This section allows a PI, or principal investigator, to quickly see if you can contribute to their lab on day one without 6 months of basic training. Historical trends show that STEM and social science departments are increasingly looking for students who bridge the gap between their field and data science. Following this is professional affiliations and service. Are you a member of the American Physical Society or the American Psychological Association? Many organizations have low-cost student memberships. Being a member shows that you are committed to the broader professional community. Service includes things like peer reviewing for a student journal, volunteering for a science outreach program, or serving on a student faculty committee. In 2026, U.S. universities are placing a higher value on departmental citizenship. They want to fund students who will contribute to the life of the department, mentor younger students, and be active participants in the academic ecosystem. Now, imagine the visual impact of this document. It is not crowded with graphics or irrelevant work history from a summer job in retail. It is a clean, data-heavy, professional record of a rising scholar. In 2026, many universities use applicant tracking systems or ATS to pre-screen documents. By using standard headings and clear text, you ensure that the software can correctly identify your publications and skills. But beyond the software, you are writing for the tired professor who is reading 50 of these after a long day of teaching. If they can see your research experience in your top publication within the first 10 seconds, you have already won half the battle. A common question is how to handle a lack of traditional research experience. Consider the scenario where Riley spent 2 years working in a related industry instead of a lab. In 2026, this is not a disadvantage if framed correctly. Riley should create a section titled Professional Research Experience and highlight the analytical and project management skills gained in that role. If Riley worked as an analyst at a tech firm, they should emphasize the data modeling and report writing they did. The goal is to translate industry success into academic potential. Case studies of successful non-traditional applicants show that those who can articulate how their professional experience informs their research questions often stand out for their maturity and focus. Finally, we have the references section. On an academic CV, you should list the names, titles, and contact information of your 3 to 4 recommenders. This should match the people writing your letters of recommendation. This allows a committee member to quickly see who is vouching for you. If they see a name they recognize, they might even pick up the phone to ask about you before the formal review begins. This is the 2026 reality of high-level academic networking. By the time you finish your CV, you should feel like you have built a bulletproof case for your own funding. You have the education, the proven research record, the technical skills, and the professional endorsements to back it all up. Your CV is the skeleton of your application. It provides the structure that holds everything else together. But even a perfect CV and statement of purpose can be undermined by a poor performance in the final, most high-stakes hurdle: the interview. In 2026, the PhD interview is no longer just a friendly chat. It is a technical defense and a cultural fit assessment rolled into one. If you go in unprepared, you can lose a full scholarship in 15 minutes. In the next part, we are going to dive into the psychology and strategy of the 2026 PhD interview. We will show you the exact questions they will ask, the trap answers you must avoid, and how to project the confidence of a funded researcher even if you are feeling the pressure. The PhD interview in 2026 has evolved into a high-definition, multi-stage assessment that functions more like a corporate technical screening than a casual academic chat. By the time you reach this stage, the committee has already verified your academic credentials and your research potential on paper. The interview is designed to test your mental agility, your professional resilience, and your ability to articulate complex ideas under pressure. It is the final gate between you and a multi-year funding package. In the US system, once you are invited to an interview, your chances of admission have statistically increased from a 5% baseline to a 30 or 40% probability. However, many candidates fail at this stage because they treat the interview as a passive conversation rather than a strategic presentation of their value. Imagine if Parker, a prospective doctoral candidate in 2026, receives an invitation to interview with a top-tier research group at the University of Chicago. Parker has spent months perfecting their statement of purpose and has a high GRE score. But when the video call begins, Parker is caught off guard by the very first question. Why should we invest $40,000 a year in your training specifically? This is not a trick question. It is a direct inquiry into Parker's self-awareness as a professional researcher. If Parker responds with a vague statement about a passion for learning, the interview is effectively over. In the 2026 funding climate, passion is a baseline requirement, not a competitive advantage. Parker needs a structured, data-driven response that aligns their research goals with the department's current needs. To master the 2026 PhD interview, you must prepare for the 3-phase interview model. The first phase is the technical defense. This is where the professors on the committee will grill you on the specifics of your previous research. They want to see if you truly understand the methodologies you cited in your CV. They might ask you to explain a specific statistical model you used, or why you chose one laboratory technique over another. Historical trends in STEM and social science interviews show that committees are looking for candidates who can admit the limitations of their work. If you are asked about a potential flaw in your master's thesis, do not get defensive. Instead, explain how you identified the limitation and what steps you would take to address it in a doctoral setting. This shows the intellectual honesty that is required for high-level research. The second phase is behavioral resilience. In 2026, many PhD programs have high attrition rates, often due to the extreme pressure of the first 2 years of coursework and qualifying exams. To mitigate this risk, committees use behavioral questions to see how you handle failure. Imagine Parker being asked to describe a time when a research project went completely wrong. The goal of this question is not to see the failure, but to see the recovery. Parker should use the STAR method, situation, task, action, and result, to describe the incident. By focusing on the actions taken to pivot or troubleshoot the problem, Parker demonstrates that they have the grit to survive a 5-year program. Case studies of successful 2026 applicants show that resilience is often ranked as highly as technical skill during the final deliberation for university-wide fellowships. The third phase is institutional fit and strategy. This is where you prove that you have done your homework on the specific department. You must be able to discuss the work of at least 2 or 3 faculty members in detail. But you should go beyond just naming them. You should explain how your work creates a bridge between their respective labs. For example, Parker might say that their interest in neuroeconomics would allow them to collaborate with Professor X on decision-making models and Professor Y on functional MRI imaging techniques. This shows that you are already thinking about the interdisciplinary nature of modern research. It makes you a more attractive candidate because you represent a potential link between different funding streams within the department. Now, let us discuss the specific trap questions of 2026. One of the most common is, where else are you applying? Many students feel they should hide the fact that they are applying to other schools, but this is a mistake. In the US system, being a multi-university candidate actually increases your perceived value. If you tell the committee that you are also interviewing at Stanford or MIT, you are signaling that you are a high-demand asset. This can often lead to the department offering a more competitive funding package or a higher recruitment stipend to ensure you choose them. You should frame your answer by saying that you are applying to a select group of schools that all have a specific research focus in your niche, but that this university is your top choice because of a specific lab or resource. Another high-stakes moment is when the committee asks if you have any questions for them. Never say no. This is your opportunity to interview them and show your professional maturity. In 2026, savvy applicants are asking about the stability of departmental funding and the professional outcomes of recent graduates. Parker might ask, can you describe the typical funding trajectory for a student in this lab? Is there a guarantee of summer funding, or is that dependent on external grants? How does the department support students who are applying for prestigious national fellowships, like the NSF Graduate Research Fellowship? These questions show that you are not just looking for a degree, but for a professional environment where you can thrive. We also need to address the logistics of the 2026 interview. Most initial interviews are conducted via high-end video conferencing. You must treat this as a professional production. The final part of the interview is the follow-up. Within 24 hours, you must send a personalized thank you email to every person on the committee. This is not just about being polite, it is your final pitch. In 2026, these emails should be brief but specific. Mention something interesting that was discussed during the interview to reinforce the connection. This shows that you were engaged and that you are a strong communicator, a skill that is essential for both teaching and research assistantships. By the time the interview concludes, the committee should have a clear vision of your first 3 years in their department. They should see you as a colleague who is ready to contribute, rather than a student who needs to be managed. You have successfully de-risked your application by proving your technical skill, your resilience, and your strategic fit. But once the interview is over, you enter the most nerve-wracking phase of all, the waiting period and the negotiation. In 2026, the first offer you receive is often not the best offer they can give. There is a specific professional way to negotiate your stipend, your relocation costs, and your health insurance benefits without appearing entitled or ungrateful. In the next part, we will move into the endgame of the PhD application process. We will show you how to decode your offer letter, how to leverage multiple offers to increase your funding, and how to make the final decision that will set the course for your entire academic career. The moment you receive your first official offer letter in March 2026 is often a peak of emotional release, but for a strategic applicant, it marks the beginning of the most critical financial phase of the entire process. This letter is a formal contract, and like any high-level professional contract, it requires a line-by-line audit. Many students make the mistake of looking only at the total dollar amount at the bottom of the page. This is a narrow view that ignores the reality of graduate student economics in the United States. Imagine if Cameron, an applicant who has spent 18 months preparing, receives an offer from a prestigious university in Northern California with a stipend of $40,000. Simultaneously, Cameron receives an offer from a university in the Midwest with a stipend of $32,000. At first glance, the California offer seems superior. However, once Cameron factor in the cost of living index for 2026, the local tax brackets, and the mandatory student fees not covered by the waiver, the Midwest offer actually provides significantly more purchasing power. To navigate this, you must become an expert at decoding the offer anatomy. Step 1 is the distinction between a gross stipend and a net stipend. In 2026, many U.S. universities have been forced to increase mandatory student fees to cover infrastructure and campus services. These fees, which can range from $800 to $1,500 per semester, are frequently not covered by your tuition waiver. You must look for specific language in the letter that states whether these fees are subsidized by the department. If the letter is silent on this, it is your professional responsibility to ask the graduate coordinator for a breakdown of out-of-pocket costs. Historical trends in 2026 suggest that as university budgets tighten, these hidden costs are becoming a significant burden for students who do not account for them early. Step 2 is the summer funding clause. A standard PhD offer typically covers the 9-month academic year from August to May. This leaves a 3-month gap in the summer where you have no guaranteed income. In your offer letter, look for mentions of summer research assistantships or internal fellowships. If the letter only guarantees support for 9 months, you are essentially facing a 25% reduction in your annual income unless you secure additional work or grants. Case studies of successful 2026 applicants show that those who negotiate for summer support during the initial offer phase are much more likely to receive it than those who wait until they arrive on campus. Now, let us discuss the delicate art of the scholarship negotiation. There is a common misconception that PhD offers are take it or leave it. While you cannot haggle like you are at a flea market, you can leverage multiple offers to improve your situation. Imagine if Cameron takes the higher prestige offer from the Midwest but mentions the higher dollar amount from the California school. The correct way to phrase this in 2026 is through a value alignment inquiry. Cameron might write, "I am incredibly excited about the prospect of joining your research group. However, I have received a competing offer that includes a higher living stipend and a relocation grant. Given the current cost of living projections for 2026, is there any flexibility in the departmental budget to match these terms or provide a one-time recruitment fellowship?" Historical trends in 2026 show that departments often have a small reserve of recruitment funds specifically for top-tier candidates they do not want to lose to a rival institution. If you don't ask, the answer is always no. However, negotiation is not just about the money. In 2026, you can also negotiate for non-monetary assets that are just as valuable. This includes a higher travel budget for international conferences, a waiver of certain teaching requirements in your first year so you can focus on research, or a guaranteed spot in university-owned graduate housing, which is often significantly cheaper than the private market. Case studies indicate that these concessions are often easier for a department to grant than a direct increase in the monthly stipend because they come from different budget lines. Comparing the cost of living, or COL, is the third step of this masterclass endgame. In 2026, inflation in major U.S. metro areas remains a primary concern for doctoral students. You must use a cost of living calculator to compare your potential locations. A $30,000 stipend in a city like Raleigh, North Carolina, might allow you to rent a one-bedroom apartment and own a car. The same $30,000 in New York City or San Francisco would likely require you to live with multiple roommates and rely entirely on public transit. You are looking for the high surplus ratio. The amount of money left over after rent, food, and insurance are paid. This surplus is what allows you to attend extra workshops, buy the books you need, and maintain the mental health required to finish a grueling 7-year degree. Once you have gathered all the data, you must face the decision deadline. In the United States, there is a universal agreement among graduate schools known as the April 15th Resolution. This states that you are not required to give a final answer to any offer of financial support until April 15th. If a university pressures you to decide in March, they are in violation of this professional agreement. You should use this time to attend the visit days, which in 2026 are often a mix of in-person tours and virtual deep dives. During these visits, your goal is to talk to current students without faculty present. Ask them the hard questions. Is the stipend actually enough to live on? Does the department follow through on its funding promises? Are there hidden costs for lab supplies or field research? The current students are your most honest source of data. Let us look at a case study of a 2026 applicant in the field of economics. This student received 3 offers. One had the highest prestige but the lowest funding. One had moderate prestige but a massive 5-year fellowship with no teaching requirements. The third was a solid R1 university with a decent stipend and a professor who was the leading expert in the student's niche. By systematically comparing the long-term career outcomes of previous graduates from each program, the student realized that the third option, the specific mentor match, led to more high-impact publications and better job placement than the high-prestige, low-funding option. In 2026, your mentor's network is often more valuable than the university's name on your diploma. Finally, we must address the ethics of the decline. Once you have made your choice, you must immediately notify the schools you are turning down. This is not just a courtesy. It is an essential part of the academic ecosystem. There are hundreds of students on waitlists hoping for a funded spot. By declining promptly and professionally, you allow the department to pass that funding to the next person in line. In the small world of U.S. academia, you never want to burn a bridge. The professor you turn down today might be the peer reviewer for your first major journal article 3 years from now. A short, polite email thanking them for the opportunity and stating that you have chosen a program that aligns more closely with your specific research methodology is all that is required. Imagine the clarity you will feel as you sign that final offer letter. You aren't just a student who got lucky. You are a professional who has audited their contract, negotiated for their value, and chosen a path based on data and long-term potential. You have secured a package that protects your financial future while providing the resources you need to change your field. You have moved from applicant to colleague, but the work doesn't stop once the ink is dry. Between the day you sign and the day you arrive on campus, there is a complex administrative transition involving visas, housing, and predoctoral research preparations. If you mishandle this summer transition, you could start your PhD at a disadvantage. In the final part of this masterclass, we are going to look at the pre-arrival protocol for 2026. We will show you how to hit the ground running, how to manage your first semester of funding, and how to set the foundation for a career that lasts long after your PhD is over. We are going to ensure that your arrival in the United States is as successful as your application was. The summer before you begin your PhD in the United States is the final strategic window of your application journey. Most students see this as a period of rest, but in the 2026 academic landscape, this is actually the transition from being a candidate to being a professional researcher. If you wait until the first day of orientation in August to understand your administrative and financial landscape, you are already behind the curve. For international students, this involves the high-stakes navigation of the F1 or J1 visa process, and for domestic students, it involves the complex logistics of relocating across state lines. Imagine if Morgan, a newly admitted PhD student, waits until June to start their visa paperwork or search for housing in a high-demand city like Austin or Seattle. By then, the most affordable university-subsidized housing is gone, and the wait times for consulate appointments have stretched into September. This simple delay can lead to a deferred start date, which often complicates the disbursement of your first stipend check. To ensure your success, the first step is the administrative onboarding protocol. As of 2026, most major U.S. universities utilize centralized portals for international student services. You must submit your financial certification immediately upon accepting your offer. This document proves to the U.S. government that you have the funding, provided by your scholarship, to cover your costs. Once you receive your I-20 or DS 2019 form, you must schedule your visa interview. Historical trends show that visa processing times can fluctuate wildly based on geopolitical factors. By completing this in April or May, you mitigate the risk of late arrival complications. For domestic students, this period is for the background check and payroll setup. You are technically becoming a university employee, which means you must provide documentation for the I-9 employment eligibility verification. Next is the financial buffer strategy. Even though you have a full scholarship, the timing of your first stipend check is a critical detail. In the United States, many universities pay their graduate assistants at the end of the month. If you arrive on campus on August 1st, you might not receive your first payment until August 31st. This means you need enough personal savings to cover your first month's rent, your security deposit, and your initial groceries. Historical data suggests that students who arrive without a 30-day cash buffer face significant stress that can impact their performance in their initial core classes. Case studies of successful 2026 cohorts show that the average relocation cost for a single student moves between $3,000 and $5,000, depending on the distance and the housing market. Let us look at a case study involving a student named Casey, who moved from the East Coast to a research position in California. Casey utilized the university's graduate student union resources to find a roommate within the department. This didn't just split the rent, it created an immediate professional network. Casey also reached out to the department's graduate coordinator in June to ask for the reading lists for the first semester seminars. By spending 2 hours a day in July familiarizing themselves with the foundational texts, Casey was able to contribute to high-level discussions from the very first week. This level of preparation is what distinguishes a funded scholar from a typical student. You are not just there to learn. You are there to contribute to a research ecosystem. The third pillar of a successful arrival is the predoctoral research integration. In 2026, many labs expect their PhD students to be familiar with the current software stack before they step foot on campus. If your research assistantship involves specialized tools like advanced BioPython libraries, specific GIS extensions, or high-performance computing clusters, the summer is your time to master the basics. Imagine if Morgan reaches out to their PI in July and asks, "Which specific software repositories or datasets should I be familiarizing myself with so I can contribute to the lab's current projects in September?" This proactive communication signals to the professor that they made the right choice in funding you. It transforms you from a trainee into a functional team member. Furthermore, you must understand the structure of your 2026 health insurance and university services. In the US, the healthcare system is incredibly complex. Your scholarship likely covers the premium, but you still need to understand your deductible and your network of providers. Many universities require you to complete a health screening or provide immunization records before you can register for classes. If you fail to do this by the July deadline, a registration hold will be placed on your account. A registration hold can delay your stipend payment because the payroll system often requires you to be an active, registered student to process your salary. This is the administrative domino effect that can derail your first month. Now, consider the social and professional network you must build. The PhD is a marathon of endurance, and the students in your cohort are your primary support system. In 2026, most departments have Slack channels or Discord servers for incoming students. Join these early. Engaging with your peers before arrival allows you to share information about the best neighborhoods to live in, the most affordable grocery stores, and the reputations of different faculty members as mentors. Historical trends show that students with strong peer networks have higher completion rates and report lower levels of burnout. As you arrive in your new city, your final task is the establishment of your professional workspace. Whether you are given a desk in a shared lab or a Corel in the library, your physical environment impacts your productivity. In 2026, many departments are moving toward hot desking or flexible research spaces. You must advocate for the resources you need. If your research involves intensive data processing, ensure you have the necessary hardware or access to university servers early. Do not wait until your first project deadline to realize you lack the necessary computing power. By following this 10-part masterclass, you have transformed from someone who simply wanted a PhD into a strategic architect of their academic career. You have mastered the grant cycles of our one institutions, the rhetoric of the statement of purpose, the mechanics of professional networking, and the logistics of international and domestic relocation. You have positioned yourself as a low-risk, high-reward investment for the United States' most prestigious research programs. The path to a debt-free doctorate is not built on luck. It is built on the systematic application of data, timing, and professional excellence. As you sit in your first departmental seminar in 2026, surrounded by some of the brightest minds in your field, you will realize that the work you put into your application was actually your first lesson in being a scientist. You didn't just get a scholarship, you earned a position in the global research economy. The transition from student to scholar is now complete. But while the application process has ended, your journey as a producer of knowledge is just beginning. In the years to come, you will face new challenges, qualifying exams, dissertation defenses, and grant applications of your own. However, the framework you have learned here, the ability to analyze a system, identify its levers, and execute a high-level strategy, is exactly what will make you a leader in your field. The American Ivory Tower is now open to you. You have the funding, you have the mentor, and you have the plan. The only thing left to do is the work. Your contributions to science, history, policy, and human understanding are what the world is waiting for. This concludes the ultimate guide to PhD scholarships in the USA. If you are ready to take the next step and begin your journey, there is one final piece of the puzzle you need to understand regarding the long-term career trajectory of a funded doctoral researcher in the global market.